My siblings tried to guilt me into paying for our parents' medical bills, but now they're furious because our parents left me everything. I'm a 32-year-old guy, the youngest in a family with 2 older siblings, my sister, Jenna, 39, and my brother, Kyle, 36. My parents weren't wealthy, but they made do. They sacrificed a lot to make sure my siblings and I had what we needed growing up, even when money was tight. Now, after years of hard work, I've built a stable career in finance. My siblings, on the other hand, haven't exactly been known for their ambition or responsibility. Jenna and Kyle live in our hometown, not far from my parents' house. Meanwhile, I moved to another state for my job a few years back. Honestly, the distance made it easier to stay sane. Growing up, I watched Jenna and Kyle lean on my parents constantly. They were reckless with their finances, constantly asking for help or loans they never paid back. My parents tried to support them, but as the years passed, it seemed like Jenna and Kyle just expected money to come their way. For years, I tried to stay out of it, telling myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I figured as long as I managed my own life responsibly, I wouldn't have to be dragged into their mess. But last year, my parents' health took a turn, and everything changed. My dad needed urgent heart surgery, and my mom's own health was deteriorating. They didn't have the savings or insurance to cover all the expenses. I was in the middle of figuring out how to help when Jenna and Kyle called me with a plan they'd clearly rehearsed. Kyle and I were talking, Jenna said, barely letting me get a word in, and we think you should pay for mom and dad's bills. You've got a good job, right? I took a deep breath, already feeling the frustration build. Are you both planning to contribute? Oh, come on, you know I'm between jobs right now, Jenna replied, brushing off the question. I could almost hear her rolling her eyes. Yeah, and I've got student loans up to my neck, Kyle added, as if he hadn't dropped out after one semester. I told them I'd think about it, but over the next few days, they bombarded me with calls and texts. They kept bringing up the sacrifices our parents had made and how I owed them. It was as if Jenna and Kyle had decided I was responsible for their guilt, too. I tried to reason with them, asking them to pitch in something, but they just kept playing the victim. Then, a week later, I got a call from my dad's doctor. He explained that without immediate surgery, my dad wouldn't survive much longer. Despite my siblings' pressure, I couldn't just sit back and let my dad die. I covered the entire surgery, the post-op care, and even my mom's medical expenses. I told myself I was doing it because it was the right thing to do, not because Jenna and Kyle had guilt-tripped me. My dad pulled through, and my mom was there with him every step of the way. When he finally came home, my parents were overwhelmed with gratitude. They told me over and over how much it meant to them and how lucky they felt to have me as their son. Jenna and Kyle, however, were nowhere to be seen throughout the whole ordeal. They didn't show up at the hospital, didn't call, didn't check in. It hurt, but by that point, it wasn't a surprise. A few months later, my parents invited me over for dinner. They sat me down, and after some small talk, my dad cleared his throat. We've been thinking about what you did for us, he began, looking at my mom with a serious expression. You went above and beyond, and it made us realize we need to make things right. My mom took my hand, her eyes full of gratitude. We've decided to leave you everything when we're gone. The house, our savings, everything. You've been there for us, and it's only fair. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt guilty because I didn't help them expecting anything in return. But I also understood why they wanted to make this decision. For years, Jenna and Kyle had taken advantage of our parents, always expecting, never giving back. I tried to talk my parents out of it, suggesting they split the inheritance, but they wouldn't hear it. They insisted that I'd earned it by being there for them when they needed help the most. I kept their decision to myself, but word got out eventually. I'd barely mentioned that I helped with the medical bills before Jenna and Kyle showed up at my door, furious. Did you seriously talk mom and dad into giving you everything? Jenna spat, looking ready to explode. How selfish can you be? Kyle was right beside her, looking equally outraged. Just because you threw some money around doesn't mean you deserve it all. We're their kids too, you know. I'd had it. I looked them both in the eyes, finally letting years of pent-up frustration out. Are you kidding me? Where were you when they needed help? You left everything on me and disappeared. Now you want to show up and act like you're entitled to something. Jenna went red, but she didn't back down. We would have helped if we could. Not everyone has the kind of money you do, okay? That's not the point. You didn't even try. It's always been someone else's problem, right? My voice was shaking with anger. But now that there's an inheritance, you're here acting like you deserve everything. They didn't have much of a comeback, but they certainly didn't let things go. A few days later, I found out just how far they were willing to go to get a piece of my parents' estate. One day, Jenna and Kyle showed up at my apartment with a bold proposition. Jenna led with it, trying to make it sound reasonable. Since you're getting the house and all the savings, we think it's only fair if you help us out. We're family, right? They wanted me to give them a monthly family support payment, essentially an allowance so they could live comfortably without having to worry about bills. Kyle even threw out an amount, saying they'd each need at least $1,000 a month to get by. When I asked what they planned to do with the money, Kyle got defensive, saying it was none of my business. I told them that wasn't happening. They stormed out, calling me selfish and heartless. But they didn't stop there. Not long after, they came up with another angle. They started bringing up childhood memories where they supposedly loaned me money, clothes, toys. Anything they could twist to make it sound like I owed them. Kyle even claimed I still owed him $500 from when I was 12 because he'd lent me his birthday money for a game. They demanded I pay back these loans with interest, calling it the least I could do now that I was rolling in money. I told them to drop it, but they kept up the charade for weeks, sending texts and emails with reminders of my supposed debts. Then things got even worse. While my parents were visiting me for a week, Jenna and Kyle decided to take advantage of their absence. They actually moved into my parents' house, bringing in their own furniture, clothes, and everything they needed to make themselves comfortable. They claimed they needed a place to stay and argued it wasn't fair for the house to sit empty when they could use it. When my parents came back, they were devastated to see their home invaded. They tried to ask Jenna and Kyle to leave, but my siblings refused, saying they were family and had a right to live there. It wasn't until I threatened legal action that they finally left. And when they did, they left a mess of trash and broken furniture in every room, as if it were some kind of revenge. Desperate for another angle, Jenna and Kyle came up with the idea of emotional damages. Jenna called me one night, saying they were planning to sue me because I'd manipulated my parents and caused them undue emotional distress. They even consulted a lawyer, though thankfully, the lawyer refused to take their case. But they kept calling and sending me fake legal demands they'd written themselves, threatening to expose my supposed manipulation if I didn't negotiate a fair split. It was exhausting, but I ignored them, refusing to let their ridiculous stunts affect me. When none of their schemes worked, Jenna and Kyle tried to turn our extended family against me. They spread exaggerated stories about how I'd conned our parents and bullied them into giving me everything. For a while, a few relatives believed them. I started getting calls from aunts and uncles lecturing me about being more generous and thinking about family. Thankfully, my parents set the record straight, explaining how I'd stepped up when they needed help and how Jenna and Kyle had only ever caused stress and disappointment. A few family members reached out to apologize, but the damage Jenna and Kyle tried to inflict was hard to forget. They'd poisoned our family dynamics just because they couldn't stand the thought of someone else having something they felt entitled to. Just when I thought they'd run out of schemes, Jenna and Kyle pulled one final, outrageous stunt. One Saturday afternoon, they showed up at my parents' house, unannounced, with a supposed financial advisor they'd hired. This man was there to mediate the estate, as he put it, to ensure everyone received a fair share. My parents and I were completely blindsided. The advisor was asking about assets, property values, and suggesting ways to redistribute things so Jenna and Kyle would get what they deemed their rightful inheritance. He even had the audacity to start probing my finances, implying that perhaps I could use my own income to balance things out if my parents weren't willing to part with more. I looked at my parents, who were visibly upset, and calmly told the advisor he was wasting his time. I explained that the inheritance decision was final and that he had no authority or right to meddle in our family's affairs. With that, he awkwardly gathered his papers and left, but not before Jenna and Kyle threw a few more bitter accusations my way, calling me greedy and soulless. They stormed off, saying I was tearing the family apart. That incident with the financial advisor was the last straw for my parents. They were heartbroken by Jenna and Kyle's behavior, realizing just how low they would stoop. My mom, who had always held out hope that Jenna and Kyle would change, finally accepted that their relationship with my siblings was beyond repair. One evening, my parents sat me down and told me they were cutting Jenna and Kyle out of their lives entirely. They no longer wanted the toxicity and disrespect, and they felt peace with their decision to leave me the inheritance. I could see the sadness in their eyes, but there was also relief. They didn't want to spend their remaining years dealing with endless entitlement and manipulation. After my parents formally went no contact with Jenna and Kyle, I expected my siblings to back down. But instead, they continued their harassment from a distance. They called and left nasty voicemails, sent messages accusing me of manipulating my parents, and tried to drag my name through the mud with anyone who would listen. But this time, I ignored them completely. As painful as it was, my parents and I eventually moved on, focusing on making the most of our time together. I helped my parents set up a budget, encouraged them to take up new hobbies, and plan trips we'd never gotten to take as a family. For once, we had peace, free from Jenna and Kyle's endless demands and manipulations. Looking back, the experience left me with mixed emotions. I never wanted things to end this way. I wanted to help my parents out of love, not for an inheritance. But Jenna and Kyle's entitlement had forced my parents to confront years of hurt and betrayal that had built up over time. While it was hard to let go of my siblings, I realized they weren't willing to respect boundaries or show genuine love toward our parents or me. Now, I cherish the time I have with my parents, grateful for the peace we've finally found. I've come to terms with the fact that not all family members deserve a place in your life. Sometimes love means letting go and prioritizing those who genuinely care. I won't lie. The bitterness still lingers when I think about how Jenna and Kyle tried to tear our family apart. But in the end, I've gained something far more valuable: clarity, peace, and the knowledge that I did right by the people who raised me. The inheritance may have been the catalyst, but the real gift was knowing I could be there for my parents when it mattered most. And that's something Jenna and Kyle will never understand.